Hi, it's Penny here, and today we're going to be talking about the books that I read in February, or more specifically in this video I'm going to talk about the science fiction and fantasy books that I read, and then I'll do another video where I talk about the thrillers and the contemporaries. And as usual, I will do this book battle style, which means I pair up all the books, I battle them against each other until we come up with the best book of the month. This video will of course just decide the best science fiction fantasy, and then I'll put whatever wins from this video up against the books in the other one. So let's just get into it, and we'll start off with some epic fantasy. So our first battle is going to be between The Dragon Reborn by Robert Jordan and The Broken Eye by Brent. So The Dragon Reborn is the third book of the Wheel of Time series. I'm trying to get through the whole 15 books in the series so that I can watch the TV adaptation, even though I've heard mixed things about it. And to be honest, I've also heard mixed things about the book series. But I do know it's a book series that is beloved by a lot of people. And even though my experience so far has been that it's been incredibly slow, I still do think there's a lot of potential in the world and the magic. And that's what I'm enjoying learning about. So in the Wheel of Time, we're following a bunch of young adults as they leave their small town, go out into the world, and become embroiled in this bigger magical conflict that's going on. So in this world, only women do magic. Because the men in the past used to use magic and they've ruined it. And there's kind of this prophecy that events that happened in the past are going to happen again. And different people in our friend group that we're following along with have different parts to play in this prophecy, but for the most part, they're trying to resist being a part of this prophecy. So it's a little bit hard to talk about the third book without really spoiling things, but at a high level, we've got the girls from the group at this kind of magic school learning about their magic, and the boys are off adventuring, and kind of at the end, they all come back together. I did find the ending a little bit convenient. Same as the second book, the boys kind of like swoop in from nowhere and save the day, and I don't really even believe that the girls needed them to do that. But again, I do think that the boys have a lot of potential in their different magics that they're learning, and I'm not sure how I feel about the girls. Mostly I feel like they're kind of samey. I do feel like a lot of the characters do feel like underdeveloped or a little bit bland. But again, this is a really long book series, so I expect that to change over time. I really need to sort out better lighting. I don't need all these shadow demons behind me. Then the second book in this battle is also a third book in the series, and that's The Broken Eye by Brent. So this is the third book in the Lightbringer series. The first of which was The Black Prism. So this is set in a world where people have this color-based magic, and most people can only draw from one, maybe two colors, but there is this religious figure called the Black Prism who's able to split light and draw from the whole color spectrum. But as it turned out, in a war that happened before the events of our series, the Black Prism's brother took his place, and nobody knows. And so this whole series, he's trying to keep it a secret. There's a whole bunch of secrets he's supposed to know that he doesn't know, but we're also following quite a big cast of other characters. There's a lot of political intrigue, there's a lot of secrets, there's a lot of corruption of power, but also some people really trying to fight against that corruption. And I really enjoy this series. I love the tone, I love the action, I love how twisty it is. I think the magic is really interesting and it's really expanded. Every book has taken it even further than the previous one. I will say in the first book or two there's quite a lot of like fat phobia and some weird sexism that it was hard to tell whether it was trying to call out that behavior or not. And I don't feel like it fully addressed some of those things, but I do think it was toned down in the third book and not as bad. So that's good. As well as is often the case when you've got a multi-POV story with this many different characters, there's definitely some that I prefer over others, some that I get a little bit like over, but I don't think I hate any of the characters. It's not like Game of Thrones where certain characters I felt like were a complete waste of my time reading them, and I would like angrily read those chapters, like so mad that George R.R. Martin was forcing me to read these things. Not that he was even forcing me, I was forcing myself. But for the most part, I feel like every character in the Lightbringer series really adds something to the story. So I am really enjoying the Lightbringer series. I loved how the third book built on things, and for that reason, I think if I'm putting it up against The Dragon Reborn, where it was kind of a rehash of the second book, we did learn a little bit more about the world, but not as much as I would have liked to have learned. So for that reason, I'm going to say that I like The Broken Eye better than the Dragon Reborn, and we're going to put the Broken Eye through to the next round. Then our next battle is going to be between Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb and The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. These are quite different, but that's how the battles work out sometimes. So Fool's Quest is the first book in the last trilogy in the Realm of the Elderlings. So far I think I've read 13 books. This will be the 14th book in the Realm of the Elderlings. I'm getting really close to the end and I'm kind of devastated because I don't want to leave these characters behind. In fact, I'm already thinking about starting a reread of the series once I finish this one. Because having learnt everything I've learnt about the world, I think a reread would be really interesting in terms of what new things I would pick up on. But anyway, Fool's Quest, we're following Fitz again. In the first book, he was an orphan child, the bastard son of the king in waiting, and they trained him up to be an assassin so that he would be useful to the family. But of course, 13 books later, a lot of things have happened. So in Fool's Quest, Fitz is a lot older. I think he's in his 40s. I'm also in my 40s, so I found it very relatable, although also sometimes quite heart-wrenching. These books are always kind of heartbreaking, and this one was no different. It kind of starts out making you think that Fitz is in this nice, happy domestic situation, but it doesn't last. Even though Fitz kind of ends up in the situation where there's all these children that he's looking after them, he's also kind of put in a situation where he doesn't know, should he try and teach them some of these assassin skills that he's got, which they could then use for survival, or should he try and just let them keep their innocence and believe that the world is a safe place. So there were some really lovely moments in this that just made my heart feel so warm, but also some devastating moments that made me cry. I cried a couple of times. There is also a second POV character in this, and when I found out who that was, I was just so happy. But then the ending, shit really went down after, like, definitely some of this book is very slow paced and it can feel at times like nothing's happening, even when it's actually just setting things up to break your heart. But right at the end, a bunch of stuff happened and I can tell the next book is going to be traumatic. Some of those children that Fitz was looking after are no longer safe, and I'm pretty sure he's going to kill a bunch of people to save them. But I'm really nervous about what's going to happen to the characters next. I definitely know that the next book is going to break my heart and make me cry. I don't know how it's going to make me do that, but it's going to make me do that. So then the next book in this battle is The Language of Thorns. This one's very different in that it is a short story anthology. Most of the stories are not exactly retellings of fairy tales, but they're inspired by different fairy tales and other stories, but often with like a clever twist to things. Although I will say after the first couple, I started expecting unexpected endings, and so they weren't as unexpected. But I do think just the twists on the stories were all very clever. I really like how she incorporated it into the Grishaverse world. So all of these stories are kind of set in the same world as the Shadow and Bone trilogy and the Crooked Kingdom duology and all the books that she's written in that world. So you've got those magic systems and those gods and those countries. I don't think there were any characters that we would have recognized though, because these are kind of like the fairy tales that the characters from those main books would have read or heard when they were younger. I will admit that I'm not sure how much these stories will actually stick with me, but then I'm not really a fan of short stories. I tend to prefer these more epic fantasies with a lot more to the story. But I do think if you like short story anthologies and you like twists on fairy tales and you liked the Grishaverse, then this is definitely worth a read. Still, if I am going to put these two books up against each other, I am so invested in Fitz and his story, and so I have to put Fool's Quest through to the next round. Okay, so next I got two graphic novels. We've got Monstress by Majorie Liu and Sana Takeda up against Ascender by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. And I realize I just said the names of the series, not the particular volumes I read. So for Monstress, I read volume 6. So again, this is very far into the series, hard to talk about without spoilers, but primarily we're following this girl named Micah. She is part arcanic, and she also has kind of a demon possessing her, and she's in this world where there's a war between witches and arcanics, and there's these ancient godlike creatures involved. There's all sorts of things going on. The main thing to know is that the art is absolutely beautiful, and the characters are really dark and cool. I love this series so much. However, I have to admit that I don't always understand what's going on. I did reread the first 4 volumes, and I found after that reread I understood what was going on a lot more. So this volume 6, I did follow it, but I didn't follow it entirely. But I have confidence that when I do a reread that I will fully understand it. And it really doesn't matter, like even when I don't really catch everything that's going on, I still just love the feeling of it. We also have in this series these necromancer cats. The amount of tails they have determines the amount of power they have. There's just so much to the world, and the way that it's presented, it's beautiful. I love it. Then we have volume 4 of Ascender. This is the last book in the series, which I'm kind of sad about, but possibly also justified because I'm not sure the author has much more of a story to tell, even though this world has a lot of potential, so maybe. But anyway, Ascender is like a spin-off series from the Descender series. In that series, these giant robots appeared and attacked humanity, which led humanity to start decommissioning all the robots, and there was a war between humans and robots, and we had this poor companion robot looking for his human family stuck in the middle of things. In Ascender, we have a lot of the same characters, but now there's a magical element brought into the story, and I do feel like the story wasn't as clear as the story in Descender. And I really think it was just my love for some of the characters that pulled me through this latest series. Still, I love those characters a lot, so I still enjoyed the experience. But I do think if you didn't love the characters of Descender that much, you might not like Ascender. The art style as well is quite rough in this series, and I felt like this last volume was maybe even rougher, although it's been a while, so I might have just forgotten. And again, there was a bit of a gap between when I read this last volume and when I read the previous volume, so I do think a reread might help me with this one as well. But still, I think, since I'm a little bit iffy on the story of both, but I do think the art and the atmosphere are just so beautiful in Monstress, I'm going to put Monstress Volume 6 through to the next round. And then for our last battle, I have 2 novellas from the same series. That is Sunreach by Brandon Sanderson and Janci Patterson up against ReDawn by Brandon Sanderson and Janci Patterson. So these 2 novellas are set in the world of the Skyward series, specifically between the second book Starsight and the third book Cytonic. I was going to read Cytonic in the month of February, but I didn't get to it. And I don't know when I will get to it because I've returned it to the library. But regardless, I did enjoy these novellas. I do think they were a little bit simple. Sunreach is primarily about these slugs that the humans have found and the abilities these slugs have and them researching that. It's mostly just fun. There is a cringy romance, but I did appreciate the themes of animal welfare. And I did find this one to be a really good reminder of what was going on in the main series. So now I am prepared to read Cytonic, even though I no longer have it and I don't know when I'm going to get to it. But then I picked up ReDawn. This one is following more one of these aliens in this world, so I haven't really talked about what the series is about. It's primarily following this girl called Spencer. She lives on this planet where the humans have been captured. Every time they try to leave the planet, they get attacked by these aliens, and they don't really know why or how they got in this situation. And in fact, Spencer's not really supposed to join the battle because her father deserted a battle, and so her family has a bad reputation. But Spencer does fight her way into the Air Force, Space Force, and eventually learns a lot more about what's going on. Then the second book really took things in a completely different direction, so it's hard to talk about, but Sunreach was just like a little bit of fun filler and a bit of a reminder. Then ReDawn kind of follows one of these aliens as they try to do something to improve their own situation. It's hard to talk about again. It was kind of weird. Partly I think because at the moment I just not really, like I'm never that into reading about war, but at the moment I'm especially not into reading about war because it's hard to do anything without reading about war at the moment. But also I felt like in ReDawn everything was just kind of oversimplified. The political system and the conflict didn't really feel fully fleshed out to me. However, there were more slugs because this kind of follows on directly after the first novella, so that was definitely my favourite part of it. So I think obviously if I'm putting these 2 novellas up against each other, I'm definitely going to choose Sunreach as the best book and put it through to the next round. So The next round will be the semi-finals, and we're going to start with The Broken Eye by Brent up against Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb. And these are two epic fantasy series that I'm really loving, but it's not really fair because, as I said, I've read like 13, 14 books in the Realm of the Elderling series. I'm so invested in it. So even though I am really enjoying the Lightbringer series, I've only read 3 books, so I'm only 3 books invested in that. As well, I just think Robin Hobb is amazing at character development and like making you feel like you know these characters and just being so emotionally invested in them. Whereas Brent I think has more of a kind of a lighter tone and there's a lot more action. Although sometimes it can be quite slow too. But I do just think I'm not as in love with the characters in the Lightbringer series as I am with the ones in the Realm of the Elderlings. So I'm sure you're not surprised. I'm going to put Fool's Quest through to the finals. So then to decide the other book in the finals, we're going to have Monstress Volume 6 by Majorie Liu and Sana Takeda up against Sunreach by Brandon Sanderson and Jancy Patterson. This actually isn't a hard decision at all, just because I feel like the Skyward novellas were so simple, whereas Monstress is so complicated that I don't even understand it properly. And like, it turns out that I prefer things to be so complicated that I don't understand them. That's not fair. But I do think there's a lot of complexity and a lot of really interesting things going on in Monstress. Whereas Sunreach was just simple. It was a lot of fun, sometimes a bit cringy, just much more simple than I think it needed to be. Even though I know it was just meant to be a novella in between things, it wasn't meant to be too much, but I just think if you're building a science fiction world with all these different things going on, why wouldn't you build it out more thoroughly? Especially because we know Brandon Sanderson is fully capable of building complex worlds with a lot of complexity to them. But anyway, I know that's just not really what he's going for in this series. And it was still a lot of fun. But I'm going to put Monstress through to the finals just because it's beautiful. I love the world. I just enjoy reading it even if I don't understand it. Okay, so the finals. This is going to be an easy one, but we'll see how we go when we put it up against thrillers and contemporaries. If you know me, you can probably guess, but let's pretend like it's a mystery. So, the finals. We're going to have Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb up against Monstress Volume 6 by Majorie Liu and Sana Takeda. And I think quite obviously I'm going to put Fool's Quest through as the best book, the best fantasy and science fiction book that I read in the month of February. We'll put it up against those thrillers and contemporaries and see how we go. But anyway, do let me know if you have read any of the books that I talked about in this video, or if you're interested in reading them. I would love to talk with you about them down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.